Book VI. Canto 4. The Legend of Calidore. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Morgan Scorpion. Edmund Spenser, The Faerie Queene. Book VI. The Legend of Calidore. Canto 4. Calepine by a salvage man from Turpine rescued is, and whilst an infant from a beare he saves, his love doth misse. Like as a ship with dreadfull storme long tost, having spent all her mafts and her ground hold, now farre from harbour likely to be lost, at last fome fifher barke doth neare behold, that giveth comfort to her courage cold. Such was the ftate of this moft courteous Knight, being oppreft by that faytour bold, that he remained in moft perilous plight, and his sad Lady left in pitifull affright. Till that by fortune, paffing all forefight, a salvage man, which in thofe woods did wonne, Drawn with that Ladies loud and piteous fhright, Toward the fame inceffantly did runne, To underftand what there was to be donne. Thus he this moft difcourteous craven found As fiercely yet, as when he firft begonne, Chacing the gentle Calepine around, Ne fparing him the more for all his grievous wound. The salvage man, that never till this houre Did tafte of pitty, neither gentlefle knew, Seeing his fharpe aflault and cruell ftarre, Was much enmoved at his perils view, That even his ruder heart began to rue, And feel compaffion of his evill plight, Againft his foe, that did him fo purfew, From whom he meant to free him, if he might, And him avenge of that fo villanous defpight. Yet armes or weapon had he none to fight, Ne knew the ufe of warlike inftruments, Save fuch as fudden rage him lent to fmite. But naked without needfull veftiments, To clad his corps with meet habiliments, He cared not for dint of fword nor fpeare, No more then for the ftroke of ftrawes or bents. For from his mothers wombe, which him did beare, He was invulnerable made by magique leare. He ftayd not t' advize, which way were beft His foe t' aflaile, or how himfelfe to gard, But with fierce fury and with force infeft Upon him ran, who being well prepared, His firft aflault full warily did ward, And with the pufh of his fharpe pointed fpeare Full on the breft him ftrooke, fo long and hard, That forft him backe recoyled, and reele areare, Yet in his body made no wound nor bloud appeare. With that the wyld man more enraged grew, Like to a Tyger, that hath mist his pray, And with mad mood againe upon him flew, Regarding neither fpeare, that mote him flay, Nor his fierce fteed, that mote him much difmay. The falvage nation doth all dread defpize, Though on his fhield he grippell hold did lay, And held the fame fo hard, that by no wize He could him force to loofe, or leave his enterprize. Long did he wreft, and wring it to and fro, And every way did try, but all in vaine. For he would not his greedy grip forgoe, But haled and pulled with all his might and maine, That from his fteed him nigh he drew againe. Who having now no ufe of his long fpeare, So nigh at hand, nor force his fhield to ftraine, Both fpeare and fhield, as things that needlefle were, He quite forsooke, and fled himfelfe away for feare. But after him the wyld man ran apace, And him purfu'd with importune fpeed, For he was fwift as any bucke in chace, And had he not in his extremeft need Been helpt through the fwiftnefle of his fteed, He had him overtaken in his flight. Who ever, as he faw him nigh fucceed, Gan cry aloud with horrible affright, And fhrieked out, a thing uncomely for a Knight. But when the salvage faw his labour vaine In following of him, that fled fo faft, He weary wox, and backe returned againe With fpeed unto the place, whereas he laft Had left that couple, neare their utmoft caft. There he that Knight full forely bleeding found, And eke the Lady fearfully aghaft, But for the perill of the prefent ftound, And alfo for the fharpnefle of her rankling wound. For though fhe were right glad fo rid to be From that vile lozell, whom her late offended, Yet now no leffe encombrance fhe did fee, And perill by this falvage man pretended, gainst whom she faw no meanes to be defended, by reafon that her Knight was wounded fore. Therefore her felfe fhe wholly recommended To Gods fole grace, whom fhe did oft implore To fend her fuccour, being of all hope forlore. But the wyld man, contrary to her feare, Came to her creeping like a fawning hound, And by rude tokens made to her appeare His deepe compaffion of her dolefull ftound, Kissing his hands, and crouching to the ground. For other language had he none nor fpeach, But a foft murmure and confufed found Of fencelefle words, which nature did him teach, T'exprefle his passions, which his reafon did impeach. And comming likewife to the wounded Knight, When he beheld the ftreames of purple blood Yet flowing frefh, as moved with the fight, He made great mone after his falvage mood, And running ftreight into the thickeft wood, A certain herbe from thence unto him brought, Whofe vertue he by ufe well underftood, The juice whereof into his wound he wrought, And ftopt the bleeding ftreight, ere he it ftaunch'd thought. Then taking up that recreants fhield and fpeare, Which earft he left, he fignes unto them made, Which him to wend unto his wonning neare, To which he eafily did them perfwade, Farre in the forreft by a hollow glade, Covered with moflie fhrubs, which fpreading broad Did underneath them make a gloomy fhade, Where foot of living creature never trod, Ne fcarfe wyld beafts durft come, there was this wights abode. Thether he brought thefe unacquainted guefts, To whom faire femblance as he could he fhewd, By fignes, by lookes, and all his other guefts. But the bare ground, with hoary moffe beftrowd, Muft be their bed, their pillow was unfowd, And the fruits of the forrest was their feaft. For their bad fteward neither plow'd nor fowd, Nor fed on flefh, ne ever of wyld beaft Did tafte the blood, obeying natures firft beheaft. Yet howsoever bafe and meane it were, They tooke it well, and thanked God for all, Which had them freed from that deadly feare, And faved from being to that caytive thrall. Here they of force, as fortune now did fall, Compelled were themfelves a while to reft. Glad of that eafement, though it were but fmall, That having there their wounds a while redreft, They mote the abler be to pafle unto the reft. During which time that wyld man did apply His beft endeavour, and his daily paine, In feeking all the woods both farre and nigh For herbes to drefle their wounds, ftill feeming vaine, When ought he did, that did their liking gaine. So as ere long he had that Knightes wound Recur'd well, and made him whole againe. But that fame Ladies hurts no herbe he found, Which could redrefle, for it was inwardly unfound. Now when as Calepine was woxen ftrong, Upon a day he caft abrode to wend, To take the aire, and heare the thrufhes fong, Unarm'd, as fearing neither foe nor frend, And without fword his perfon to defend. There him befell, unlooked for before, An hard adventure with unhappy end. A cruel beare, the which an infant bore Betwixt his bloody jawes, befprinkled all with gore. The little babe did loudly fcrike and fquall, And all the woods with piteous plaints did fill, As if his cry did meane for helpe to call To Calepine, whofe eares thofe fhriekes fhrill, Piercing his heart with pities point did thrill. That after him he ran with zealous haft To rescue the infant, ere he did him kill, Whom though he faw now fomewhat overpaft, Yet by the cry he follow'd, and purfued faft. Well then him chaunft his heavy armes to want, Whofe burden mote empeach his needfull fpeed, And hinder him from liberty to pant, For having long time, as his daily weed, Them wont to weare, and wend on foot for need. Now wanting them, he felt himfelfe fo light, That like an hawke, which feeling herfelfe freed From bels and jesses, which did let her flight, Him feem'd his feet did fly, and in their fpeed delight. So well he sped him, that the weary beare Ere long he overtooke, and forced to ftay, And without weapon him aflayling neare, Compelled him foone the fpoile adowne to lay. Wherewith the beaft enraged, to loofe his pray, Upon him turned, and with greedy force and fury, To be crofled in his way, gaping full wide, Did thinke without remorfe to be avenged on him, And to devoure his corfe. But the bold Knight no whit thereat difmayd, But catching up in hand a ragged ftone, Which lay thereby, so fortune did him ayd, Upon him ran, And thrust it all at one into his gaping throte, That made him groane and gaspe for breath, that he nigh choked was, being unable to digeft that bone, ne could it upward come, nor downward pas, Ne could he brooke the coldnefle of the stony mas. Whom when as thus he combred did behold, Striving in vaine, that nigh his bowels braft, He with him clofed, and laying mighty hold Upon his throte, did gripe his gorge fo faft, That wanting breath him downe to ground he caft, And then oppreffing him with urgent paine, Ere long enforft to breathe his utmoft blaft, Gnashing his cruel teeth at him in vaine, And threatning his fharpe clawes, now wanting powre to ftraine. Then tooke he up betwixt his armes twaine The little babe, fweet reliques of his pray, Whom pitying to heare fo fore complaine, From his foft eyes the teares he wiped away, And from his face the filth that did it ray, And every little limbe he fearcht around, And every part under fweatbands lay, Leaft that the beafts fharpe teeth had any wound Made in his tender flefh, but whole them all he found. So having all his bands againe uptyde, He with him thought backe to returne againe. But when he looked about on every fide, To weete which way were beft to entertaine, To bring him to the place, where he would faine, He could no path nor tract of foot defcry, Ne by enquiry learne, nor ghefle by aime, For nought but woods and forefts farre and nigh, That all about did clofe the compafle of his eye. Much was he then encombred, ne could tell Which way to take, now weft he went a while, Then north, then neither but as fortune fell. So up and downe he wandred many a mile, With weary travell and uncertain toyle, Yet nought the nearer to his journeys end. And evermore his lovely little fpoyle, Crying for food, did greatly him offend. So all that day in wandring vainely he did fpend. At laft about the fetting of the funne, Himfelfe out of the foreft he did wynd, And by good fortune the plaine champion wonne, Where looking all about, where he mote find Some place of fuccour to content his mind, At length he heard under the forefts fide A voice, that feemed of fome woman kind, Which to her felfe lamenting loudly cryde, And oft complained of fate, and fortune oft defyde. To whom approching, when as fhe perceived A ftraunger wight in place, her plaint fhe ftayd, As if fhe doubted to have been deceived, Or loth to let her forrowes be bewrayd. Whom when as Calepine faw fo difmayd, He to her drew, and with faire blandifhment Her chearing up, thus gently to her fayd: What be you, wofull dame, which thus lament? And for what caufe declare, fo mote ye not repent? To whom fhe thus: What need me, Sir, to tell That which your felfe have earft ared fo right? O wofull dame, ye have me termed well, So much more wofull, as my wofull plight Cannot redreffed be by living wight. Nathlefle, quoth he, if need do not you bynd, Do it difclofe, to eafe your grieved fpright. Oft times it haps, that forrowes of the mind Find remedy unfought, which feeking cannot fynd. Then thus began the lamentable dame: Sith then ye needs will know the griefe I hoord, I am the unfortunate Matilde by name, The wife of bold Sir Bruin, who is lord Of all this land, late conquered by his fword From a great Gyant, called Cormorant, Whom he did overthrow by yonder ford, And in 3 battles did fo deadly daunt, That he dare not returne for all his daily vaunt. So is my lord now feized of all the land, As in his fee with peaceable eftate, And quietly doth hold it in his hand, Ne any dares with him for it debate. But to thefe happy fortunes cruel fate Hath joyned one evill, which doth overthrow All thefe our joyes, and all our bliffe abate, And like in time to further ill to grow, And all this land with endlefle loffe to overflow. For the heavens envying our profperity, Have not vouchfaft to graunt unto us twaine The gladfull bleffing of posterity, Which we might fee after our felves remaine In the heritage of our unhappy paine. So that for want of heirs it to defend, All is in time like to returne againe To that foule fiend, who daily doth attend To leap into the fame after our lives end. But moft my lord is grieved herewithal, And makes exceeding mone, when he does thinke, That all this land unto his foe fhall fall, For which he long in vaine did fweat and fwinke, That now the fame he greatly doth forthinke. Yet was it faid, there fhould to him a fonne Begotten, not begotten, which should drinke and dry up all the water, which doth runne in the next brooke, by whom that fiend should be fordonne. Well hoped he then, when this was prophecied, That from his fide fome noble child fhould rife, The which through fame fhould farre be magnified, And this proud Gyant fhould with brave emprize Quite overthrow. Who now ginneth to despize The good Sir Bruin, growing farre in yeares, Who thinkes from me his forrow all doth rife. Lo this my caufe of griefe to you appeares, For which I thus do mourne, and pour forth ceafelefle teares. Which when he heard, he inly touched was With tender ruth for her unworthy griefe. And when he had devifed of her cafe, He gan in mind conceived a fit reliefe For all her paine, if pleafe her make the priefe. And having cheard her, thus said: Faire Dame, in evils counsell is the comfort chiefe, Which though I be not wife enough to frame, Yet as I well it meane, vouchfafe it without blame. If that the caufe of this your languifhment Be lacke of children to fupply your place, Lo how good fortune doth to you prefent This little babe, of fweete and lovely face, And fpotlefle fpirit, in which ye may enchace Whatever formes ye lift thereto apply, Being now foft and fit them to embrace. Whether ye lift him traine in chivalry, Or nourfle up in lore of learned philofophy. And certes it hath ofttimes been feene, That of the like, whofe linage was unknowne, More brave and noble knights have raifed been, As their victorious deedes have often fhowne, Being with fame through many nations blowne, Then thofe which have been dandled in the lap. Therefore fome thought, that thofe brave imps were fowne Here by the Gods, and fed with heavenly fap, That made them grow fo high to all honourable hap. The Lady, hearkning to his fenfefull fpeach, Found nothing that he faid unmeete nor geafone, Having oft feene it tryde, as he did teach. Therefore inclining to his goodly reafon, Agreeing well both with the place and feafon, She gladly did of that fame babe accept, As of her owne by livery and feafon. And having over it a little wept, She bore it thence, and ever as her owne it kept. Right glad was Calepine to be fo rid of his young charge, whereof he skilled nought. Ne fhe leffe glad, for fhe fo wifely did, And with her husband underhand fo wrought, That when that infant unto him fhe brought, She made him thinke it furely was his owne, And it in goodly thewes fo well upbrought, That it became a famous knight well knowne, And did right noble deedes, the which elfwhere are fhowne. But Calepine now being left alone Under the greenwood fide in forry plight, Without an armes or fteed to ride uppon, Or houfe to hide his head from heavens fpight, Albe that Dame by all the meanes fhe might Him oft defired home with her to wend, And offered him his courtefie to requite, Both horfe and armes, and what fo elfe to lend. Yet he them all refused, though thankt her as a friend. And for exceeding griefe, which inly grew, That he his love fo lucklefle now had loft, On the cold ground maugre himfelfe he threw, For fell defpight, to be fo forely crofl, And there all night himfelfe in anguifh toft, Vowing, that never he in bed againe His limbs would reft, ne lie in eafe emboft, Till that his Ladies fight he mote attaine, Or underftand, that fhe in fafety did remaine. Canto IV. Book VI. The Legend of Calidore.